right, welcome to part 5. Those of you who can hack it. All right, I misspoke. I said at the end of the last video that I was going to get into what executive functioning is. I will be doing that right after this. I think it's actually best to address another really big reason why there is such controversy out there in the world about ADHD and whether it even exists. This could fall also just under, more specifically under the rubric of also one of the many understandable reasons why it is so misunderstood. It is a syndrome. It is a spectrum disorder, and that means that it consists of a cluster of symptoms that have a good deal of variability in terms of how intense these symptoms are. And also, like what is stable that makes it a syndrome is that the people who have ADHD have many, to meet the diagnostic criteria, they need to have a certain level in 3 ways, which I'll go into, which I think will allay a lot of people's concerns about being overdiagnosed. Because it's actually not it's not that hard, actually. It's not, anyway, well, I'll get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself all over the place, which is part of poor executive functioning, by the way, is when you don't do that as well as other people who are of your age. And then after, anyway, sorry, there I go again, straying again. One thing that people can say is a big objection and sort of wipe their hands of the whole matter is they can say that, well, and completely legitimately, when they hear about what the symptoms of ADHD are, any person on earth can truthfully say and accurately say that, well, I've done that. I've had, I've lost my keys. I've had periods of my life where I was really out to lunch. I've had difficulty with, I've made some poor decisions now and then in my life. Hasn't everyone? And they would be right. Or I forgot an appointment once, twice, maybe 10 times. And I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of people just sort of dispense with it, or they suspect someone with ADHD, the real deal ADHD. They suspect them of just making up, they just are looking for some excuse for bad behavior. And I will get to a very good refutation of that as a premise. But yeah. So, but here's the thing. Here's what makes ADHD a disorder. It is what actually does the best at discerning it is not any even executive functioning tests that test for it, because there's just too wide a variability there. There's some people who have very serious and chronic and pervasive and long-standing executive functioning disorder, but who are still managed to, perhaps it's the kind of a variation on the white coat syndrome for like high blood pressure. Like when they are under the gun and they're very self-conscious and they're trying to, they have external inducements to focusing better than they normally would under a lot of other circumstances, then they may be able to perform these tests and the results will not indicate executive functioning problems. But that does not mean that they are not there for that person to a very disabling, pervasive, long-standing degree. What really constitutes a proper diagnosis, and this is according to the world's experts in this, and the foremost one pretty much agreed upon is Russell L. Barkley. He's the specialist when it comes to this disorder, and he is he's also been the principal investigator on a bunch of terrific longitudinal studies that demonstrate what the effects of ADHD are. So it's very much a matter of it quacks like a duck, it looks like a duck, behaves like a duck, and has the sort of life course of a duck. As far as ADHD is concerned, he and his teams and his other research, his other investigators have very, very, very well, in terms of their methods, and have very well demonstrated with high study subject retention rates and so on. They very, very well quantified and substantiated the damages, the downstream effects of what ADHD does when it's not managed properly. But here's the thing. So going back to this, so what constitutes a real best diagnosis for ADHD is an in-depth patient history. When it comes to adults, anyhow, is self-reporting rating scales for symptomology, and so symptom frequency and severity, and and how long-standing has been the presence of these symptoms. An in-depth patient history is going to reveal that for an ADHD person, there are basically 4 things that you need to discern the real deal. Number 1, you need to define what a disorder is. And this is again, where a lot of people get their knickers in a twist. And it's understandable, too. It is. I mean, having a mental illness is very stigmatizing still, unfortunately. And, so people want to be very, very, and they should be very cautious about using, to label anybody with a mental disorder. But here's the thing. And again, Barkley offered this in one of his lectures, and it's just fantastic, because it's just so fantastic. He addresses that worry, that deep concern about misuse of the term. And he said, look, and the title is the poster put, I don't know if it was his line from his lecture, but they put also in the title of the clip, if you ever want to look it up on YouTube. And it said, what's the difference between, it's sparkling personality or a disorder, or ADHD, a disorder of ADHD. And what he says is, I don't know how people can argue with this. He said, look, if you have all of the symptoms that are in the DSM or other, and also from, clinical anecdotal descriptions of what is the symptomology for this disorder, and you have it, you have those symptoms and they're severe and they're pervasive and they're long-standing. And he's like, but your life is great and you feel fine and things are working well for you and your life is such that this isn't creating any problems for you, then he said, you don't have a disorder. People make this a lot more complicated than they need to. He said it becomes a disorder when it starts causing damage to that person's life. When they start having problems, bad problems, painful problems, and terrible consequences as a result of the symptoms, and when they are reporting that is the case, he's like, that is the point. It's not that complicated, people. It's like, that is the threshold at which something becomes a disorder. When it is creating disorder in your life in a chronic fashion, and then in a predictable fashion, and then when investigated in a predictable syndromic pattern of effects that we can investigate and we can quantify and we can describe very, very well. He's like, that's the point at which it becomes a disorder. So, but however, if you have all those symptoms, but you're feeling terrific, then fine, you don't have a disorder. We're not going to try and put that on you. So I like that. It's it's a commonsensical and effective definition of it. And I think that should calm a lot of people down. And actually, anyway, sorry, I'm wandering into the other topics I meant to address later, but, here's a really funny thing. It's hilarious, really, when you get a little distance from it, a little emotional distance from it, is that people are so very worried about overdiagnosing this disorder. And I can see how they might be with children. I could entertain that, definitely, that this is a disorder that's being overdiagnosed in children. Being overdiagnosed in children, it certainly isn't in girls, though. I can tell you that. It's not just me talking, it's the data as well. Just based on the prevalence rates of ADHD in female populations, it's like, how do you explain that it's 50-50 in adulthood, but it's only 1 in 3, ADHD, or 1 to 3 is the ratio of diagnoses in childhood. It's like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. So there are girls that are going under the radar in childhood, but it could be the case that quite a few boys are being, maybe they are, I just don't know, but maybe they are. You know, I'll entertain it since I'm ignorant about that. I don't have the backup to say one way or the other. I could see how there could be legitimate worry that there are little boys and adolescent boys that are being misdiagnosed with ADHD, when in fact what is happening is they have apparent or real cognitive deficits that are related, that have an etiology that is not ADHD, but perhaps some rather complex and maybe more complex nexus of factors that cause that person to be having these kinds of ADHD-like difficulties in school, which is usually the setting where, you know, it gets the alarm goes off, if it does at all, for someone with ADHD or ADHD-like symptoms. So, okay. As for the adult population, however, of ADHD, it is very, very much the opposite. As I said in video 1, 90% of adults with ADHD do not know that they have ADHD. Many of those were diagnosed in childhood, but no one's told them since that the medical literature has caught up to the fact that somewhere in there, like a good number, a very substantial proportion of those who had ADHD in childhood will have it forever. It will be permanent. They will have a bunch of symptoms, cognitive symptoms that will have to be managed if they're not to cause terrible damage to that person's life for the rest of that life. It's a chronic condition, and there's no cure for it. Yeah, those people, you know, and then the majority of that 90% of adults with it who don't know, they're people like me who were never diagnosed properly. I diagnosed my freaking self, and then I went and got the legit, you know, I diagnosed myself. I figured it out. And then I got the best, like the best level, the highest standard of evaluation a person can have. And I mean, here's another thing. Anyone who doesn't believe in ADHD, you know, I wish I could show you what the results were of the neurological testing. Because the performance was like, it could be demonstrated that there are certain things that my brain cannot do. That it can barely do, let alone can do to a normal developmental level, let alone to anywhere near the approximate level of some of my other abilities, my intellectual abilities. There's a very pronounced disparity in performance level with different cognitive faculties that I have, and that is another big red flag for ADHD. Okay, oh my God, I really went on. We're at 12 minutes again, so I'm going to go into the next video. There are going to be a few more. All right, thanks for sticking with me, those of you who have. I appreciate your interest. I really do in this subject. I wish more people were.